From Genesis to Revelation, God has always required one thing of his people. That one thing is obedience. Obedience has nothing to do with what other people do. Obedience rests upon the cornerstone, the foundation stone of the authority of a higher figure. There is something called compliance. There is something called conformity. And most of the world falls under conformity or compliance or both. Very few people fall under obedience when it comes to God's requirements. Let me explain. Conformity is simply acting a way to fit in with others who are behaving similarly. And so I grew up in the United States. I play basketball. All the young men are playing basketball. I grew up in maybe Canada. I play ice hockey. I grew up in Brazil. I play soccer. That's conformity. It has to do with what others are doing. There's something called compliance. I do it because I am under pressure from my peers, those close to me. Again, it has to do with what other people are doing. Obedience has nothing to do with what other people are doing. Obedience has to do with an authority figure whose word has been spoken. And so when you and I obey God, it cannot be based on what my husband is doing, what my children are doing, what my village is doing. It has to do with, do I recognize the authority of God? So when God came down to the garden to talk to Adam and Eve, he did not approach them as a family. He spoke to Eve first individually. He spoke to Adam, first. Then he spoke to Eve. Then he spoke to the serpent, because God requires an obedience that has nothing to do with what other people do. God has said, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. He requires that of us regardless of what those around us are doing. In the days of Noah, an entire world population disregarded the preaching of Noah to the extent that only 8 people entered the ark. In the days of Lot, 5 cities were burned. 1 righteous man escaped. I repeat, 1 righteous man, that was Lot. God has never had the majority on his side. Let me repeat. When God requires obedience of us, it has nothing to do with what others are doing. It must be an individual decision. That is why God spoke to Eve individually and spoke to Adam individually, punished them individually. As you consider keeping God's holy Sabbath day, make an individual decision. Do not consider what others are doing. Consider the authority of God. Do you respect the authority of God, the creator of heaven and earth? If you do, you will obey him regardless of what those around you are doing. My prayer, my plea, my hope is that those of you listening to me will make personal decisions to obey God, even if every other person on the face of the earth disobeys God. May the Lord bless you, my listening friend, and I mean it when I say, may the Lord bless you as you make an individual decision to obey. Let me conclude by saying, compliance considers others. Conformity considers others. Obedience considers a higher authority, and that is God. Obey God. Keep his Sabbath holy, and let him bless you beyond your imagination. God bless you as you keep the Sabbath holy in individual obedience to God.